I can't get my screensaver off, but I'll keep trying.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Climate Emergency Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Do we have any apologies for absence?
No, but Councillor de Jong and Councillor Rowland are online.
Okay. Minutes of previous meeting. Page 5. Has anyone got any comments on page 5? Oh, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the questions I put was about the GWR passenger survey. The minutes say about when it's going to be available. I kind of thought I asked for a copy of it when it was available. I mean, is it available? Can we have a copy? Does anybody know what it says?
You're saying if it is available, you'd like to see it, but you haven't seen it yet. Have you got that? Yeah.
We'll find that out for you.
Okay. Anything else? No? Okay. Can we have a show of hands from people who were here? Right. Minutes are approved. Public question time. Are there any questions, maybe? Thank you. And that goes for all the types of questions. Good. Lovely. Right, on to item 28, the domestic and commercial retrofit update. Catherine? Oh, Ari.
Thanks, Catherine. Yeah, so I'll just give a brief introduction to the paper. So we have within the Climate Emergency Action Plan retrofitting targets associated with 4 different areas. So that's our social housing, our schools, private domestic, and our corporate estate. Retrofitting actions make up the second biggest carbon saving within the CAP, so is a real key priority of our action plan. In addition to the environmental benefits, there are a range of co-benefits associated with retrofitting, from financial benefits, from lower energy costs, as well as health benefits from warmer homes. So we use energy performance certificates, EPCs, as the metric across our retrofitting targets. They provide a measure of how energy efficient a building is and range from an A, which is very efficient, to a G, inefficient. I'm just going to draw out 2 successes from the past year before I hand over to questions. Firstly, our successful application to the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. We are awarded £750,000 from the government to support retrofit of our social homes. So this funding will help improve the energy efficiency of 100 of our social homes over the next 3 years, bringing about environmental benefits as well as health and financial benefits to our social housing residents. The other success I'm going to mention is the launch of the thermal imaging cameras. So this scheme has enabled residents across the borough to loan a camera from the library to help identify where heat is being lost. We have received positive feedback from users of the scheme, and some of the statements are listed in the report. At one point, we also had over 170 residents on the waiting list for these cameras. So today, Katrina, did you want to say anything? Or?
No, well, I'm happy to hand over to the committee for questions. I think, as you can see, it's quite a wide-ranging area, and it's one where there are areas which are, say, firmly in the sphere of the council's control, but others, such as the private market where we are very much an influencer and an educator. So I think that's also worth bearing in mind, and something I think the team has done a good job this year of drawing out and being very inventive in ways to reach out. So I think particularly the thermal imaging camera scheme has been fantastic in engaging residents. Like we say, I think we've had hundreds of hires. We've now got quite a number in circulation, and it's something that other neighbouring local authorities have picked up on and been in contact with the team to try and copy or learn from us.
Thanks. So just to say, we've got online tonight, we've got Martin Cook, who's the interim head of housing regulation improvement. So if there's any social housing questions, he's online. Casper's also online if there's any specific more detailed questions that come up, as he is leading on the Warm Homes project. We also have Sarah Morgan, Service Director of Commercial Property, to answer any questions associated with our corporate estate or our schools. And I'll be able to pick up any private domestic questions. So really hand over to you all for any questions.
Thank you. Okay, has anyone got any questions? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. I have a few, actually, a few questions and observations. The first one about the thermal imaging camera. It's great that it's so popular. Perhaps we should shell out some money and buy more, rather than people waiting for them, because time is of the essence. So that's a suggestion. We had the new depot opened, which I know is very thermally efficient, and I'm not sure if it's a B or an A, which is great news to see that happening in terms of our own council facilities being very energy efficient. The thing that I was disappointed to see is there's no solar panels on it. It was solar panel ready, but no solar panels on it. So the question is, why did we not put solar panels on that building when we should be putting them on all our building? The other issue is about the kind of private housing stock. So around 50, reading the figures, around half our housing stock is below C. So we've got about half our housing stock to upgrade to hopefully B, whatever. There's a massive piece of work to try and get done in the next 4 years. And I know there's been lots of communication and encouragement and getting people to understand their energy usage, but how are we going to actually deliver this in terms of how do we reach out proactively rather than waiting for householders to come to us to understand their energy usage? I think it's something we need to do. It's a massive hurdle, but I don't understand how we're going to achieve this in the next 4 years.
Very conveniently, although not introduced, Andy's here. So he's going to answer the question about the depot.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, sorry, we did in initial plans have proposal to put solar panels on the roof, and we orientated the roof. You'll probably notice it's not quite a mono pitch roof, but it's got a huge, much larger area of south-facing roof than north-facing roof, and that was to accommodate solar panels. However, when we were talking it through with the energy team, we decided it would be more sensible to do an integrated approach to solar power on the whole of the depot rather than just putting a series of panels on in one go on the actual building. So we do have proposal to take forward solar panels on the site itself, and that will come forward at a future state. Well, I haven't got a date from the energy team, but the rest of the depot we would envisage would take about another 18 months to deliver. So I would sometime in that sort of time period, we would have a better idea of how we're going to do that and integrate it across the whole site. I think from what I remember from talking to the energy team it was more to do with the infrastructure around the solar panels and how we use it efficiently on the site as well as selling it back. That was the issue.
So your questions on thermal imaging cameras. So we recognise that we want to bring that waiting list down. So we have purchased more cameras, and they're due to be introduced into the libraries in hopefully the coming weeks. The comment on the 51% EPC, we anticipate that is higher to get an EPC, you only require an EPC when you construct, you sell, or you rent property. So it's likely that residents have undertaken retrofit work, but they have not then had an EPC following that works, because there is a cost to that. So that 51% we expect to be the lower, the kind of lowest percentage, and expect that to be a higher figure. Your final question, just.
It's really about, proactively, instead of waiting, doing good publicity. If people are interested in climate emergency, they'll sign up to our newsletter. That's not going to be everybody. Those people are preaching to the converted almost. It's the rest of the people, tens of thousands of households out there who aren't proactively trying to find out about energy usage. How do we engage with them? And the only way I can see it is actually people going out, knocking on. You can find out who's a D, an E, and an F. We know the households that need help. We should be proactively, and that's going to take resources, and that's going to take people and plans and things in order to do that. But that's the only way I believe that we're going to deliver that in 4 years. You can't do it passively waiting for people to come to you. You've got to go out, knock on doors, and encourage people.
Yeah, and I think we recognise that is a challenge. It's seeing what we can do with the resource that we have and the money that we have, which is, we don't have a lot. So we've been delivering a retrofit campaign over the winter and autumn this year. So that is where we've been going to libraries and having a drop-in session for residents to come and speak to us. And not only are we seeing that as an opportunity to provide information to residents, but we're also seeing it as a way we can capture feedback and understand what are some of the queries and questions and concerns that residents have in around retrofit, and that information we're taking, we're shaping to help shape future campaigns in this space. So hopefully we can tailor more communication in the future that then more people will kind of relate to and kind of see that there's a real link. What we've found is actually having the launch of the thermal imaging cameras, that has been a really good hook to get people to come and speak to us. So we know that has been quite successful. So it's something we will look to see. Is there other things like that we can look at introducing in the future that gets people out to speak to us and gets us kind of helps more, residents kind of retrofit their properties.
Do you want to mention some of the other?
Okay. You haven't got anything else to add then? No. Okay. Marie-Louise.
Thank you. I'm not sure if it's that I wasn't quite clear when you talked about council social housing. Is that HRA? I mean, what? In old money, council houses, yeah? In which case, I'd be interested to know what's going on with housing association homes because I know that some residents in housing association have been concerned that sort of like the housing associations are so concerned about AWAB's law and trying to raise the, abide by the new regulations in that they're not sort of perhaps looking at other things that they should be doing, like retrofitting. So I just wanted to ask if it is that you are working with council housing in this interim, what's the plan for dealing with social housing? And the second question was about the private housing. I was interested in, do you have any figures about the privately rented sector? As you said, an EPC is needed every time, like when a house is let. Do we know, what proportion of housing that is privately rented has a EPG of like D or above or whatever. And, you know, because I receive quite a lot of inquiries or concerns from residents who are living in privately rented houses, which are, you know, extremely energy inefficient. And there's very little, or there seems to be very little interest on the part of landlords to do that, because obviously the bills are being taken by the tenants. So those two questions.
So just on the housing association, so I know with our partner RPs, registered partners, we have an annual survey that they complete, which outlines the breakdown of EPCs, and it is we can see from the data that we've got that it looks positive. You know, we've got, I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but we can certainly share that. So that is with our partner RPs. I'm not sure what we'd, and Martin, I don't know if you want to come in with anything you're aware of with our, anything else that's going on in that space.
I'm afraid, not with other housing associations, no.
Sorry, just to be clear, you're talking about HRA houses here.
That is HRA,
that's right.
yeah,
No, absolutely.
correct.
I thought that was, thank you, that's fine.
And then just a point on the private rental. So we actually have this year, we want to have a bit of a focus in that area and see what we can do to kind of support residents who are living in private rental properties. So we've had discussions around potentially engaging with some estate agents to try and target landlords through that way. We've also had, we had a meeting today with Citizens Advice, who are delivering energy advice service for Wokingham, and we had this discussion and talked about how potentially we could work together to target this area. I think there is a challenge that we want to ensure that the residents benefit from cheaper bills, and it's not landlords benefiting from profit, which I think is quite a key challenge that we'll have to kind of just work out how we look at that. But it's on our radar to look at this area.
I think it's also worth noting that there is national legislation that covers the private rental sector that has a minimum energy efficiency target. I believe it's C for new tenancies from 2028. So it is being pushed into that sector, but it'd be great to look more focused at the local area.
How is that going to be enforced? Is that going to be something that local government is going to be looking at?
That's a good question.
You know, because it's easy to make regulation. It's just like how it's enforced is when the fun starts.
Sorry, I can come in on that. So if private rental sector will be the local government that will enforce that. At the minute, it's really hard to tell how many private rental homes there is because the EPCs don't actually record the tenure. So there is something that the government did in the past where they had like a housing register that allowed local authorities to see how many private rentals there is. At the minute, that such a thing doesn't exist, but there's plans to potentially create that again, so then local authorities could access it. But yet, it will sit within the local authority to enforce it. With the private sector, with the social housing sector, it will be the housing regulator.
Sorry, can I just add, I understand that you can apply through the electricity companies or the gas companies, that if you're a private tenant, you can apply for help to increase your EPC, whatever it's called, EPC. Because we have actually looked into this, but it has to be the tenant that applies for it through the gas or electricity board. I don't know. I've not heard of
the
it.
eco scheme.
I'll talk to you afterwards because we did look into it. Thank you.
Well, I was going to add something to this. I was very concerned about this EPC of F. We've got one house that is F and a few that are E. Are we going to target those ahead? Because we're only going to have the money to do 100 social homes. So are they going to be in the target? Sorry, it's a small question, but...
No, fair. I think, Martin's probably best placed to answer that one.
I can, yeah. So it is something that we are looking at to ensure that we get best value for money with the E and the F. and it is something that we are looking at those properties to see if they are best value for money to keep them within the HRA stock. So it is something that potentially we're looking at maybe selling those properties off because they're just not going to be viable for us to retrofit and try and make, and then obviously purchasing new properties into the HRA that are obviously a lot more energy efficient for our residents.
Okay, that seems a reasonable answer. Who's next?
Chairman, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yes, you are next on the list. Yes, Beth.
Yeah, sorry. Talking about the council houses that we own, in my ward, we've got some extremely old concrete built council houses that even in summer must be quite cool. What, if anything, can we do with those when we eventually get round to that?
Casper, you're probably the best one to answer with this on the technical side of things.
I suspect you're talking about the Cornish unit housing. So within our housing stock, we have got quite a significant amount of non-traditional buildings. So they're not traditional type of style buildings that you see around, in UK. And yeah, these buildings do tend to, I guess, overheat and lose a lot of heat throughout the winter periods. So things that we could do to those is to insulate the loft and insulate the walls, external wall insulation. But again, going back to Martin's point, that's quite expensive process. It's probably something that the housing will need to review if it's actually affordable, because again, these buildings are non-traditional. It's very difficult to retrofit, also very disturbing for the tenants when you do the retrofit, because there's a lot of work required. So yeah, there needs to be a review done, which Martin and team are hoping to do soon.
It would probably be better if we had a scheme to get rid of those houses and rebuild on the same site some more modern, better built houses.
Yeah, so that is something that we are reviewing. It's always quite challenging to demolish old buildings because obviously there's a lot of history in them and people obviously object to losing those historic buildings. I think, it's something that we will look at and every option will be considered, which will be best for our residents.
I think historic in the loosest term there, old
Yes.
rather than historic.
Yes, but people still do like to see the old compared to the new.
I think I'll take you to see them.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I had a couple of... I thought E seemed very low for a target for the corporate estate. Have I misread something?
So the E is the current target within the national legislation minimum energy standards. There has been consultations about increasing that standard from an E, and that was a graduated sort of raising of that standard towards 2030, but that hasn't actually made it into legislation. So currently at national level it's E, but at a local level we have, through the asset management plan and the climate emergency action plan, set ourselves higher targets, which is eventually to get as many to an A by 2030 as we can. So we have set ourselves a higher target than nationally we're being set.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think that's probably it. I just thought I'd add that not all solar installations are MCS approved, because mine isn't. So there may be a few more as well that you could add. Okay, if there's no more questions, we can get on to the next item, which is... Is this the verbal report?
Yeah, and I'll just very briefly introduce
Parkham Solar Farm. Yeah.
Before handing over to Sarah. So we're bringing this update following the last meeting on the 11th of November. So there's been some very good progress in some areas, notably the work with the design and build contractor to bring the projected build costs down. However, there has been a significant update as part of the National Connections reform process, which officers will talk you through now. And it's a very fast evolving situation. So the purpose of it is a verbal report because conversations were literally still happening today. So we wanted to make sure the committee has the most up-to-date information, and there'll be further communications going out on this matter, I think tomorrow morning, sort of more publicly, but we wanted to make sure you get the freshest information. And with that, I'll hand over to Sarah, and then I'll briefly wrap up at the end. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Catherine. So as Catherine said, members of the committee will remember we were here back in November presenting on the business case for the solar farm project. At that time, our main focus was around negotiating with Equans to ensure that the construction contract represented best value for the council. I'm pleased to report that since that meeting, we've had many productive conversations with Equans in the weeks in the run up to Christmas. I met with their directors. There was a lot of work done to identify cost savings and ensuring we were driving value. And the latest contract position and price that we got to with Equans indicates significantly improved value, alignment with market benchmarks, and we've done that really through some removal of some costs that we were asking Equans to do that actually we could do in a better way. So the construction of the Greenway, for example, or the construction of the crossing over Barkham Ride, we can use our existing contractors to do that rather than paying Equans to do it, who would then appoint a subcontractor to do that work. So we have got to a position with a cost with Equans where the project team's recommendation was to direct award the construction contract to Equans, which is a really positive place to be. We've also been continuing to work on our connection costs, the highway works required, and the energy export strategy, as we outlined back in November. There were some detailed questions discussed at the committee in November regarding the solar panel specification, degradation, I can never pronounce that word, insurance. There have been some written responses since. There was a question into full council, but a full written responses to those questions will be circulated after the meeting, but they were in line with what we talked about in the committee. So I had hoped that given all this good work and where we had got to, that this would be a very positive update to the committee, and I would be here reporting that we were working towards that contract award and a completion date with Equans of March, and that we would then be starting on site soon after that. However, in mid-December, sort of 10 days before Christmas, the project team received the outcome of the connection reforms that were undertaken by the National Energy System Operator, known as NESO. These were long-heralded reforms, and their purpose was to reorder the connections delivery programme for renewable energy projects, including solar, at a national level. And the reforms were aimed at prioritising connections to the grid of those projects that were shovel-ready, namely those which had site ownership, planning permission and funding available, all things that we have for Barkham. We had anticipated that these reforms would be good news for the project, reconfirming and perhaps even bettering our previously agreed connection dates. Just as a reminder to the committee, the connection dates that we were working to for the solar farm were in two stages. We had stage one was a non-firm connection by the 31st of August 2026, which was then extended to April 2027, pending completion of some works at Fleet Bramley. And then a stage two connection, which was a firm connection at Q1 2028, following completion of further super transformers investment. Trying not to be too technical. In the period between the non-firm connection date of April 27 and the firm connection date of the Q1 2028, there was the potential that the electricity export from the solar farm would be curtailed, and this was modelled at and estimated at less than 10% of total export. So we had modelled the business case on that basis, and we were still achieving an acceptable level of income, even with that circa 10% curtailment. Following the connections reform work by NESO, the council would advise in December that the Barkham Solar Farm project had been given Gate 2 status, which is a good thing. Gate 2 status is given to projects that meet NESO's requirements for readiness and strategic alignment, and Gate 2 projects are given a confirmed connection date, a connection point, and a queue position within Gate 2. So all really positive stuff. That's what we wanted. We wanted to be gate 2. However, the project has been allocated to phase 2 within gate 2. And this means that NESO have deemed that the energy generated by the solar farm is not needed until between 2031 and 2035, and that a firm connection date, which would allow 100% of our energy exports, cannot be guaranteed before this time. This represents a minimum of a 3-year to a maximum of a 7-year delay to the solar farm being able to export 100% of its energy from our previous firm connection date of Q1 2028. The original non-firm connection date of April 2027 still remains, so we could connect still in April 2027, but there is no guarantee at this point of the level of curtailment that could be in place. So they cannot tell us at the moment whether it would still be a circa 10% curtailment, could be a 50% curtailment, could be 80%. They are not in a position to be able to tell us that. Under their current timetable, we do not expect to receive formal contract variation for the project with formal dates and the curtailment confirmed until Q3 this year. So we will be waiting until September this year to understand what those connection dates are. We haven't been given the rationale or the justification for the change in the connection dates. We don't understand why there has been this change in approach given the readiness of the project and the projected shortfall against solar generation targets pre-2030, and we have asked NESO and SSEN for this justification or explanation. The best case scenario is that this is an administrative or technical error and our application and project has been wrongly assessed with regards to its readiness and connection dates, and in finding that error will be revised back to the original dates. The worst case scenario is that having correctly assessed the project against the reform criteria, the revised connection dates that we have been given will be the earliest we can formally connect to the grid. In response to the news that we got, the Chief Executive, the leader and the Executive Member Catherine have written to SSEN and NESO as a matter of urgency, and there was a meeting with the CEO and leader and representatives from SSEN just before Christmas. We are lobbying at the highest level to understand the rationale behind these changes and for a guarantee of this to happen as soon as possible. Further technical meetings between officers and reps from SSEN are taking place, including this afternoon, so this is representing the latest position and will continue to meet regularly. We're also been in contact with the Greater South East Net Zero Hub, which is a regional government-funded initiative who work with local authorities and the public sector to support the development and financing of net zero projects. And the Net Zero Hub are collecting case studies of affected projects from this reform announcement. We understand that the Wokingham Council is not the only local authority which has been negatively impacted by this connection reform announcement, and they will be raising these impacts to government accordingly. We're also utilising other contacts in the industry to raise awareness of the implications of these reforms. The revised connection dates are wholly incompatible with the delivery programme for the solar farm. As you are aware, the council was due to enter into the contract with Equans imminently for a spring 2026 start on site and completion and connection in April 27. With this level of uncertainty and lack of guarantee of connection dates or curtailment levels, it is not appropriate for the council to enter into a multi-million-pound contract to build the solar farm at this time. We have advised Equans, our proposed contractor of the news and the delay to be able to enter into contract with them, which obviously has a very negative impact on them as a contractor. We will continue to work hard and lobby to revert the connection dates back to the original guarantee, but this news will mean a delay to implementation until we have enough certainty to be able to award the construction contract. It's not a level of risk that we can, I would advise as a council, take at this time. So I'm sorry it's not as positive an update. As a project team, we are incredibly disappointed, frustrated, particularly given all of the work that had been happening and we had got into a really good place with Equans and we were ready to go. So it's not the update that I'm afraid I wanted to give. So I'll just hand over to Catherine just to summarise and then take questions.
Thanks, Sarah, and I would like to echo thanks to you and the project team. It has been a huge amount of work, and this is incredibly frustrating, and I'm sure members of the committee will share our frustration with this. I think, just to emphasise, within our control, we had made very good progress since we'd last met and stand ready to deliver the project. I think just to reflect that the connections reform had to happen. It is absolutely needed to clear out a backlog. We remain, to be honest, quite confused and frustrated that this project it is ready, it meets all readiness criteria. It is also locally owned, and I think that's very important. And I know that the government has shared support for both local energy owned by local authorities and community energy installations. So that's why we're continuing to engage with people like the Greater South East Net Zero Hub to emphasise the impact this is having. There's multiple routes that we're taking, both formal appeals process that NESO and SSEN kind of are running to double check that everything was completed correctly, and sort of broader engagement with groups and key decision makers to see if there's any options to bring this forward. And I very much welcome any suggestions from the committee on other approaches we can take to try and address this very disappointing update to what we had hoped very much to be coming and saying, yes, all systems go. And if I can find one silver lining, it's perhaps that we hadn't signed a contract for the full build and then been hit by this news, which was very much unexpected given the contractual connection agreement we had in place with SSEN. Thanks.
Thank you. Has anyone got any suggestions?
Well, I mean, one suggestion is obviously you've engaged with various people is to leverage the two MPs in the area to lobby on our behalf. I mean, first of all, I share my disappointment, and having been in projects which are cancelled at the last minute like this, I know how frustrating it is for people at the coalface, and pass on our best wishes to them that hopefully we'll get through this. Incredibly frustrating. As a local ward member, can we still assign this land though to future solar farm? Hopefully, it was at one point earmarked for housing, and we don't want that to happen. So please make sure it's still earmarked for the solar farm.
Yeah, and just to reiterate, we are planning to reach out to the borough's MPs this week, if not very soon. But absolutely, this does not change, as it stands, our commitment to the project. We still absolutely think that this is the plan for the land and what we hope to proceed with, hopefully sooner rather than later, and very much view this as a regrettable delay rather than a fundamental challenge to the concept of the Barkham Solar Farm.
Do you think it'll have any effect, this sort of thing will have any effect on the Miro project?
No, Mirok is a much smaller project and has a connection date of the end of this year. So that won't have an impact on that.
Moses?
Sorry, I wanted to ask, can you provide a bit more background information on these connection reforms, please?
We may follow up or send over some useful links for reading. So essentially, the big concern was that there were a lot of projects that had applied for connections, some of which the developer maybe didn't even own the land or have any rights to it, and it was creating a huge backlog with particularly the distribution network operators and others that any new projects that could come forward were getting dates of late 2030s. So, like I say, I very much welcome the reforms it was needed to do to essentially clear out the queue, have a true assessment of which projects are perhaps zombie projects, i.e. they're never going to happen. And I think there were some examples where connection applications had been made multiple times for the same bit of land. And so the aim was to bring forwards the projects that were ready to go to connect first. That is one of the reasons why we're quite bemused and confused as to why we've been pushed back. One potential explanation is that, as I understand it, or the indications seem to be that the delay is not due to a local constraint, it's due to a higher level sort of national transmission level constraint, where essentially there's going to be a capacity limit somewhere. I do wonder whether we are falling somewhat foul of not being a small enough project to essentially fly under the radar like Mere Oak, but we're also not a very, very large project that I suspect may be being prioritised for those kind of larger things. Again, that is somewhat my speculation, but I think it is, the process had to happen. It's been run by the National Energy Systems operator in collaboration with the distribution network operator. So for us, that is Scottish and Southern Electricity Networks, SSEN. If you have any other questions, we're happy to kind of take them away, but perhaps to give a bit more on the aim.
I'm just, because I do know that Backham is one of the 5 large solar farms, but it's not the biggest. There's a 500 and something. I'm just thinking whether it's a capacity limitation on behalf of SSEN to take on all of these solars that are coming together at the same time. Because that's why you have curtailment. Curtailment simply means they don't have capacity to take all the exports. And so what they have to do is to prioritize projects that are already under construction. And then Backham will be at the back because if not started construction, obviously.
Yeah. So, I mean, Sarah, do chime in. My understanding is this is not an SSEN constraint. It is a higher level, looking at the broader network, including where the various regional distribution networks are connected and those constraints. So that's why I think we always knew that there was a need for investment in some of those higher transmission sites, and that's formed part of this. So we're not just looking at the whole. I don't believe SSEN have not been the ones to rank these. It's been done by NESO, the National Energy System Operator.
I was just going to add a bit about one of the key drivers is the Clean Power 2030 target. And NESO had looked across regionally, mapped out the amount of energy by each technology, so wind, solar, battery, and given an amount that each region would produce. And so then as part of this connection reform process, there was an assessment in the southeast, the solar number was a lot higher than what needed to be done to meet that Clean Power 2030. So that's kind of fed into that connection reform process.
And I think that goes back to also to the point that where SSEN were stressing to me today it was around NESO were looking at when they needed that type of energy. So there was enough solar energy in our area, southeast, whatever our name is, to up to 2030, and then our project was needed from 2020, 2031 and 35. And that's quite a frustration. I think what we can do is we'll send around a copy of the statement so people have it, but we'll also send the links to the NESO website. It's relatively, if you kind of read the first few pages, it's kind of understandable, but there's lots of technical detail there that people can then dive into. It has the long list of all of the sites nationally and where they're ranked, etc. So people can spend the time, and more than happy to be approached by members of the committee if you'd like explanation, etc., or further questions based on that information that you've seen.
Marie-Louise is next.
Sorry, it's one of those where you've just answered one of the questions, which was, why are we in Gate 1, and who can I, whose manager can I talk to to sort this out? So there will be a list of the projects which have gained Gate 1 and then Gate 2 Phase 1.
Yes, there are lists of the projects. What there isn't, and what is very hard to get, is the justification and our actual assessment. So we have requested that detailed information, because on what we know against the criteria that we're using, we would tick all of the boxes and be ready to go. So what is it that they have seen in the assessment that makes us less ready than the other ones?
And there was no appeals process. There's no sort of...
There is a formal appeals process that we can go through, and which we will do.
Right.
But at the same time, we are also doing informal conversations at any level that we can possibly get to.
Okay.
The difficulty that we have is, regardless of those conversations or how positively and how well they go, the formal confirmation of that is that NISO are still saying they will need until September to give us the formal contractual answer. And obviously we have a 52-week build programme. So if we have to wait until September, that's September 27 at the earliest that we'd be ready, which is the frustration. So it's one, understanding where we are in the queue and can we bring that connection date forward, but also seeking that clarification and commitment earlier than September 26, so we can get on an award and get building.
Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, outside commercial sensitivity, there's going to be a cost to this delay. Yeah. And is there like a ballpark figure of what this is going to cost? Because even if, if they come back and say, our mistake, you're good to go, if they say that in July, we're not presumably going to be able to walk into the same contract that we signed with Equans, or we would have signed with Equans. Yeah. So,
yes, you're right. The principles are right. I don't have a number yet. But yes, there will be, with inflation and all sorts of things, it will not be the same number that we have in December that we would have in July and onwards. So somebody has to hold that cost increase. Well, there is that question to be had because, very contractually, the council has invested a significant amount of money in this project on the basis of the contractual position that we had in terms of our connection date. Would we have spent this much money at this point if we knew our connection was going to be 2031? No, we wouldn't have done. And so somewhere that expenditure of public monies has to be held to account.
Moses, Moses,
Okay. I'm just wondering then, what is the implication for Solar Farm 2?
For Solar Farm 2, again, we have a difficulty. It has been awarded Gateway 1, which is the reverse. It's actually later. The numbers don't make sense. So it does have there is also therefore a negative impact on that project as well. Again, we don't understand why, because we haven't seen the assessment. We were advised that readiness for projects that were later were either site ownership or planning consent. You didn't need both. So we actively we made a decision not to go for planning consent for that solar farm because that is a very expensive cost. And we relied on our site ownership, which we demonstrated through the evidence that we submitted as part of our application. But that has also gone back, and that is into the late 2030s. So again, we're having similar conversations. We have a bit more time because we don't have a contractor with a price that we want to secure, but that is also a negative impact on our solar ambitions. So I'm afraid it is not a happy programme at the moment.
Yeah, and so obviously we're not particularly pleased with this outcome, but we'll keep doing everything we can to try and address it. I think there are some learnings here as well in terms of the things that are within our control. Obviously, this process, we hope, is a steadying of the ship and now a clear process going forward. So there'll be not as much turbulence in terms of dates moving in by a very, very significant period of years in the context of obviously our CAP aims. These have pushed both projects beyond 2030, but there are, we can see with projects such as Miro at a smaller scale, perhaps not not being impacted so much by these reforms. And, you know, we touched on retrofit before, but one component that the team is going to be looking at is the generation potential across our property estate as well. There's other complexities and there's other sort of lower cost effectiveness, and quite frankly, the scale is much more difficult to achieve. But I think this sort of reinforces that we need to look everywhere, and there may be sort of other things that are with more firmly within our control, and that we can continue to kind of push forward with our ambition to generate as much renewable energy in the borough as possible. In the longer term, as we electrify our society, we will need more power. So, you know, it's not that, and I think from what I've seen from SSEN, central, southern and SSEN area is actually still looking short by 2030. So it's very confusing why we can't bring Barkham forward sooner. But yeah, the electricity demand will grow as we electrify transport, as we electrify our heating. So this is not we don't need solar farms. We absolutely do, to get, you know, clean and greater energy security. So it's still a direction of travel very much committed to. We just need to work through these rather challenging external dates that have been given to us.
Sarah.
Yeah, just to confirm to the committee. So obviously, this is the first time publicly we've given this news. As I said, it's a very moving picture. We are proposing tomorrow to issue a press statement out on behalf of the council, reflecting our disappointment and frustration and what we're doing, and we will make sure that the local community, the community liaison group that we have, are all informed of this delay. And that's how we are we're kind of showing it's not as Catherine said, our commitment to this project is still here. We definitely want to build this thing, but it's frustrating that we've got this delay. So that will go into the public domain tomorrow. And then I think, Peter, your suggestion of through to the MPs, anywhere where we can lobby, anywhere where we can get our message across. And that was very clear. The message from SSEN today was, be loud about this, express your frustration, do everything you can, speak to anybody you can to try and get this back to where we want it to be, and really show our commitment. So as a council, that's what we're planning on doing wherever we can. So I would encourage everybody to help us in that messaging as well.
Okay, thank you. I've got a little question on the slides which we were sent this morning, but they haven't been shown at the meeting. But can I ask a question about them? Oh, that was last meeting.
They were the slides from one of the actions in the minutes was to circulate the slides. Yes. Apologies, they only went out this morning.
Can I ask you a question that I should have asked last
You can. I don't have them in front of me, so
well,
I'm going to...
It's the positive. It's the Meroke. You were talking about an EV charging hub, but is that going to be for people coming off the motorway and needing to charge, or so it'll be rapid? Or is it going to be for people to park all day and do some, cheap, slow charging? Because the latter would help with people who don't have their own driveways.
Absolutely. The ambition or the objective is to do both, and we just need to try and make sure we do both well and in the right proportions. Mm-hmm. And things like those who are coming off the motorway to charge, what facilities do they need? So, if you're coming on a long journey, you might want to buy a cup of coffee, you might want to be able to go to the toilet, etc. Whereas if you're leaving your car all day, you just need the place to park your car, don't you? So the objective is to try and meet both of those bits of the market. The split between the different types of charges is what the business case is just working through at the moment to see how we split between the two.
So you think you might well be providing facilities as well?
We've got to weigh up. This is what we're working through at the moment, is the cost of providing those facilities against the income that we would get, and then also looking, the Reading services, for example, just down the motorway, they have rapid chargers. So actually, do we want to be in competition with them, or should we focus on the trickle
Yeah,
for the park and ride.
it is
So,
very close to Reading services.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the park and ride type of charging might be more.
So that's what we're just working through at the moment. I'm happy to come back to committee and give them an update when we've got that absolute split nailed down.
Okay, thank you. Have we exhausted that now then? Let's go on to agenda item 30. You're going to introduce this again, Catherine?
I'll just very briefly and then hand over to the team. So this is, I think, been done every year since the motion to declare an ecological emergency. Hopefully the officers will speak to some of the specific actions. I think it's really good. There's been a lot of progress and it is very linked to the next agenda item as well, which will incorporate ecological emergency or nature into the climate emergency strategy and action plan more broadly. So I'll hand over to Laura.
Thanks, Katrin. So I'll just provide a quick background and summary of the report, which is intended to provide progress today on the ecological emergency motion. So for a bit of background, Woking Borough Council declared an ecological emergency in 2024 in response to national and local declines in biodiversity. Within the initial 2024 declaration, 10 priority areas were set out to outline the ongoing work required to integrate ecological considerations into planning, land management and community engagement. Over the coming years, officers will be working collaboratively with the climate team to develop a comprehensive ecological emergency action plan, building on the original 10 priority areas from the motion, and it's proposed that the ecological emergency actions will be embedded into the proposed climate and nature strategy, which is going to be discussed at the next agenda item. But as a summary, some of the progress made so far on the ecological emergency includes robust biodiversity policies have been included in the Woking Local Plan update that's been submitted to the Inspectorate for examination. A minimum of 20% biodiversity net gain policy for the Loddon Valley Garden Village was included within the LPU and is being sought through the Strategic Design Guide alongside key nature, biodiversity and landscape principles. Under the Environment Act 2021, all areas of England have been required to prepare a local nature recovery strategy, and WBC have played an active role as a supporting authority to Royal Borough Windsor and Maidenhead in the development of the Berkshire LNRS. Following its development, the Berkshire LNRS was finalised and adopted by RBWM in October 2025, and WBC have endorsed the LNRS through an individual executive member decision earlier this week. So the LNRS intends to provide a shared strategic direction across the county. It identifies biodiversity priorities, maps existing high-value habitats and highlights spatial opportunity areas where habitat creation and restoration will be delivered to greatest benefit and where investment can be targeted. New SANGs continue to be brought forward, including the design of a 33-hectare extension to Rook's Nest Wood SANG, which is scheduled for planning application submission in 2026. Biodiversity net gain schemes have progressed on several council-owned sites, such as Ashenbury Park and the COVID Memorial Woodland, and significant work has been underway to develop habitat management and monitoring plans to ensure the long-term management of those sites. In addition to this, work has been underway with legal teams to secure conservation covenants, which will enable the sale of those B&G units on those sites and other council-owned sites. And alongside this, work has been underway with commercialisation teams to get us in readiness for marketing B&G units to the open market. Future opportunities will still continue to be explored and assessed in line with the LNRS priority habitats and opportunity areas. In the past year, the Council's countryside services have continued to deliver improved ecological outcomes across over 30 sites, as well as undertaking a range of individual conservation projects, such as the installation of barn owl nest boxes and a new Swift Tower at Dinton Pastures Country Park. And they've continued to support regular conservation groups at sites such as Lavelles Lake, Fox Hill, Highwood and Heath Lake. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a summary of an overview of progress today. But as I said, the next agenda item is going to be talking about the climate and nature strategy, and our intention is that the ecological emergency motion will be more embedded into an action plan within that to align those two strategies together. Happy to take any questions.
Marie-Louise.
Yes, so my lack of knowledge, are the BNG, are they the same, what used to be habitat credits? And if they are, so could you just explain a little bit more about sort of like, essentially how much will they be worth? Because I know that there's sort of like different grades of land in terms of distinctiveness and whatever. And is it income producing, or are they a one-off sale? I just don't quite understand. But as it's a potential source of income, it would be good to know a bit more.
So in answer to the first question, I think they are what you call conservation credits, effectively. Credits is the term used for the government-backed scheme. So, but it's the same principle, effectively. We call them biodiversity net gain units. As Laura said, we are working with the commercialisation team. We had some estimates of what the value of units would be generally when we did our original business case. What's emerged in the intervening period is a much more complicated picture, in that not only are different distinctiveness units, i.e. quality units, worth different amounts of money, but different habitats are worth vastly different amounts of money. What I would say is that the whole marketing of BNG is predicated on it would generate a receipt. Now, that's likely to be more akin to a capital receipt than a revenue receipt, because effectively we would sell that unit, have to manage it for 35 years and have that paid for, but we would take a one-off top slice as a profit, which is slightly akin to the land value, effectively. It's the value of leasing the land for that purpose for 35 years. What that actually looks like in real terms is quite difficult to ascertain at the moment. There is some benchmarking for BNG values, which has been done nationally. We think it's divided into north of the country and south of the country, and we think we are probably slightly above the average for the south of the country, because I think BNG is going to be related to land values, because that's effectively what it's delivering, because it's delivering development, and our development land values are very high in Wokingham. So I think it's because you have to buy your units locally within the local authority area or the national character area. If you go outside those areas, you have to buy twice the number of units. So whilst there is some, it's not necessarily land values alone in Wokingham, but in this particular general area, the county of Berkshire, then land values are still quite high right across Berkshire. So I suspect that someone who wants units in this area might have to pay slightly above what the average for the south of England is, because we're in quite a high value area. But as I say, it's still an emerging market, and I would have to say that the market has developed slightly slower than I was expecting. It's things take a long time in planning. You get permission, and then a year's worth of discharge of conditions, and then 6 months of procurement before you actually implement, when you actually need the units. So we're still only 2 years down the line from it becoming mandatory. No.
Can I just briefly add, I think, from a planning perspective, just to reiterate that we do still put it's a biodiversity hierarchy. So we, through the planning side, we do still emphasise that we expect developments where possible to enhance biodiversity on site. And so, yes, we are creating BNG units, and I think it's fantastic to be able to have this this mechanism essentially to finance further enhancement of our natural space and habitats, but it more perhaps with that lens than this is going to make. I think members of the committee know my background was in carbon trading, and for 10 years. So I share perhaps some of the concerns with it and know them quite well. So I've had quite extensive conversations with the team, and I think there's lots of interplay as well between the risks that we would take on by selling units ahead of time, and obviously that we'd have to carry for that period. But it's a very exciting area. I think there has been some perhaps dampening through the planning and infrastructure bill has perhaps threatened to perhaps dilute the value or the need for these. So that's something we've also been watching quite closely and has been a bit of a thorn in the side of the market. So yes, still developing, but I think it's great. And I would also like to thank the team that because we've been developing these units on our own sites, understanding the process in detail, there's also been, looked at the opportunity to be essentially the auditor for other parties. So we have a sort of, it's not mutual, it's the responsible body status and an arrangement, for instance, with Bracknell Forest that we could audit theirs. It is Bracknell Forest, and they do ours and vice versa. So, and that's something that we could potentially offer that service more commercially as well, and further sort of support biodiversity around the borough and perhaps beyond.
Sorry, now I'm going to clear. You've got promote habitat creation, restoration in right places. What exactly does that involve when you talk about because I live where there used to be deer and I haven't seen them for a while.
Thank you. Well, I think the LNRS is kind of going to be key in that, because that identifies these areas where habitat restoration and recovery should be targeted. So I think that is going to really help us inform things. And, already prior to that, we look at projects that are going to look at the specific qualities existing and potential of sites when we're looking at progressing projects already. But yeah, I think the LNRS mapping and what's come out from that is going to help inform us even further on where we should be targeting these projects and investment.
Okay, if there aren't any other questions, let's go on to the next item, which is the climate emergency strategy. Katrine.
Thank you. Yes, I'll briefly introduce and then hand over to Mary. So, bringing this forward really because we've been talking, officers are probably going, Catherine, stop throwing so many ideas around. But I think one of the things coming into the role I really wanted to look at is how we emphasise nature alongside climate, and recognising that they are twin crises, they're deeply interconnected and can't be addressed in isolation. So this strategy intends to provide an important mechanism for delivering joined-up solutions, so restoring nature while increasing resilience to flooding, overheating and other climate impacts through the resilience item, going further to actually sound out. I mean, we could call it resilience or we could call it adaptation, but at the end of the day, we're recognising that climate change is happening. We're feeling its effects. There was a slightly sobering report from the Met Office last year that 2025 was the warmest year on record, and 4 of the warmest years on record are in the top 5 ever. Just 2014 is sneaking in there. So it's sort of moving us on to bringing climate change is here. We need to get on top of how it will affect our council services, but I'd say almost perhaps more importantly, how is it affecting our residents? How are our residents experiencing climate change? How will that change in the future, and what can we do about it? So bringing both climate, which we are already, I think, very strong at, and this committee is part of maintaining and ensuring that's the case, nature up to the same level, that we're ensuring that the ecological emergency actions are fully incorporated into a sort of core strategy, and that resilience piece all together to really strengthen our council's commitment to all 3 pillars and proactively manage them going forwards. So it's quite a high level at the moment, but really welcome the committee's views, and I'll hand over to Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, so just building on that, so we are proposing in the report that the scope of the CAP is extended to encompass that climate resilience and nature recovery. It builds on the success of the CAP, specifically how embedded the CAP is across the council, but also with a number of our partners. So Laura and Andy have touched upon the nature recovery side of stuff, the climate, and Katrina's touched upon the climate resilience, but just that definition, climate resilience is the ability to prepare for, recover from, and adapt to the impacts of a changing climate. We recognise climate resilience is a bit of a newer area of focus, and we are seeing a number of authorities across the country starting to bring in that climate resilience and nature recovery piece into their strategies. And there's a few referenced in the report if you wanted to have a look, or if you have already. So just thinking about some of the benefits that having this strategy will could potentially bring to Wokingham. So we are aware that climate change disproportionately affects more vulnerable groups, so specifically low-income households, people with health conditions, and older or younger age groups. So having this strategy will hopefully embed more consideration about climate risk into existing service delivery. Also developing a strategy puts us in a stronger position to apply for grants that will come up in this area, and we are aware there has been grant opportunities around specifically the climate resilience space over the past year, and without having that strategic direction, it makes it more challenging to apply for these grants. So it gives us that kind of anchor and that direction as a council. Also just wanting to mention that the conversations that we've had with our strategic partner, University of Reading, we know that this is an area that they are really interested in. We know other universities, they're interested in this area. So again, it puts us in a stronger position to work with academic institutions in this area and potentially look at innovation and kind of be quite forward thinking in this space. So yeah, welcome any questions or comments that you might have tonight.
And just on that particular subject, I mean, what about the Natural History Museum? We're actually going to have some people from there, working in the borough, so they might be interesting to talk to. No, there's a Natural History Museum. Peter, were you putting your hand up?
Yes. So I sort of raised a similar point when we incorporated the ecological emergency into the climate emergency scope. We are, I think, Catherine, you kind of acknowledged that you're adding scope to what is already a team which has a lot on their plate. So, frankly, we're struggling to hit our 2030 target, what we're doing in terms of climate emergency, carbon neutrality, etc. So, adding more stuff to the team, and I see the financial impact is zero. There's no extra cost, so you're not employing more people to do this. It's more stuff on Mary and her team to deliver. So my concern is by adding this in, we're making it harder to deliver what we've already committed to, and also harder to deliver this as well. So my second observation is climate change resilience is incredibly expensive to deliver. There's no indication of any costs in here. To be able to mitigate the impact of, reduced rainfall or sudden deluges, sudden changes in climate, both in terms of its council's ability to deliver services, but also the ability for people to go out their everyday lives, is incredibly expensive. But there's absolutely no indication of the millions of pounds that will cost to deliver climate resilience. So those are my two things. One is scope creep, got a stretch team already. It's going to make it harder to deliver. And I understand the thing about getting funding from central government, because there'll be funds set up that we can pull into, hopefully to get more staff to do things. But also, no indication. And perhaps when it comes to council, I did see a date, 2026 sometime, there'll be an indication of costs. But there's my two worries.
Thanks, Peter. I think that's very valid. I would just say, I see this as pulling together, perhaps putting the resilience piece to one side for now, and I'll address that separately. We do already have the ecological emergency. Yeah. So we've already committed to that. But in discussions with the team, it was, we've seen in the update tonight, there's been good work gone on. I'd say the format of that and some of the actions, perhaps the world has moved on. So, the implementation of actions very much remains with Andy, Laura and their teams. But by incorporating perhaps the tracking under the I think successful framework we've got from the CAP, the aim is to have that greater clarity and accountability actually without duplicating the processes in the way that perhaps has been done before, and hopefully making more of the overlap. So I appreciate. So it really is an aim to bring them together, what we're already doing together in a more coherent way, and hopefully save duplication of effort rather than to create more work. With resilience, yes, it's very expensive. But right now, I don't think probably most local authorities, most of the country knows actually what's needed. And I'm personally very worried about that. And I think it's, that every time we come, and that will help us, I think, as a council, both, yes, apply for grants, raise awareness of what this is going to take. But, we see it in the discourse every day of, scrap net zero, it's too expensive. It's too expensive not to. And without this work, I think we'll find it very, very difficult to even get a handle on what is already coming our way. So I completely acknowledge the concern and I share it. But I think this is going to be hopefully a fundamental piece of work to flag what is needed and prepare for it. Otherwise, it's going to hit us anyway and we won't have any preparation.
I guess I'll just reiterate a bit about it puts us in that stronger position for grant application. So recognise there will be cost to some projects at the moment. So if we have this strategy in that direction, then that will put us in that stronger position. I think also it will be key in when we develop the strategy and the action plan following, that we set realistic targets and what we can do with the resource and with the funding that we have. So even if we can't do big projects, potentially looking at smaller projects. So for example, looking at water butts and getting them in people's homes to address the drought that we have in the southeast and things like that. So there are a different scale of projects that we can look at delivering, and we can just make sure we're realistic when we set that the targets and the actions when we come to that stage.
Moses.
I'm looking at the resilience stuff on heat wave, floods, and extreme weather. I know you're going to come up with a refined strategy maybe July this year. I'm just wondering how much of this will be national remit rather than local. Because flooding, heat wave stuff, they are not generally localized issues.
Yeah, I think we can. So is that what we can do locally compared to what's happened nationally? I think, again, like this process of looking at this will identify, I think, what is happening nationally and what we are already doing locally and help identify where the gaps are. So actually, if there is lots going on at that national level that we don't want to duplicate efforts, we want to work efficiently and effectively. So I think this process will help, map out what bodies are doing what and make sure we fill the gap that needs to be filled.
And whilst I agree they're national problems, I think these are the kind of things that already and perhaps increasingly will impact the services that we deliver. So I think it's also about helping services across the council to supporting them to perhaps be better prepared for the future. If we've got having heat waves, we need to be there for our residents, particularly vulnerable groups, whether that's cold spaces, is that a role for our more of our public buildings and so on. So which to an extent is already happening, but hopefully will give other teams support to deliver their services in a more resilient way.
Yeah, I was very. You've got. Oh, I'll just make a couple of observations. I was very impressed with the Lambeth plan. It seemed to be very directed towards residents, and asking them what they could do, suggesting what they could do, and also seemed to mention several community sort of projects. So yeah, I mean, I just thought that there were lots of lessons to be learned from the Lambeth one. It was very accessible. It was very accessible with a small a as well, I thought. The other thing I was just going to mention was the Swallowfield Flood Resilience team, which I know is very well thought of, isn't it? And I wondered whether it was how much that had been kind of publicised across the in other parts of the borough, what the sorts of things that they've been doing, and whether it would be appropriate. I don't know. I mean, the whole borough seems to be pretty watery to me, and some bits a bit more watery than others.
Yes, I think that's a project that's grown up from the community, which is probably why it's so strong, isn't it? And it's a community that's always suffered from not flooding in a sort of surface water flooding, hasn't it, in very, very localised areas. So I think that's probably grown up there. I know that Ray, the flood manager, is doing some similar work with communities in Hurst at the moment, I think. So I think it's picking the right locations where people want to be engaged, isn't it? You've got Hurst has got a similar issue, which is it's very low lying and flat, and has a network of ditches running right across it that generally flood fairly regularly. So I think it's, I know Ray is picking up the most priority areas in that sense. So that helps.
But I think that's a really good example. We're not here to duplicate efforts where there's stronger, great strength coming from the community. Charleville also has a flood plan and a very active flood warden, and that's actually more river flooding. But this is not to take away from those, but hopefully to share best practice across the borough as well. I think that's going to be a key outcome, and I hope we can play a bigger role in supporting it, though I know the teams already are doing so.
Just briefly, you have touched on it, is behavioural change. I do think going forward we need to teach in a heat wave that we do have a siesta in the afternoon, which I do anyway, but it's the behaviour change of that we are going towards net zero, but also we need to change how we garden and everything. Will that be taken into account?
It's an interesting one, and I think I look forward to engaging this group as we develop the strategy and beyond. But I think part of the motivation, from my side at least, is that climate can feel very abstract to people. It's it's gases we can't see. It happens on a relatively long time frame, and I think the vast majority of people would agree they want to and believe we should take action, but it feels very remote from them. And actually, nature on one side is something that really resonates. Well, I think we are a borough who are very rightly proud of fantastic nature and take good care of it. So that's acknowledging the interconnectedness, the fact that it's actually through nature that sometimes we see these first impacts of climate change. I saw daffodils in November and felt very disturbed by it. And so by bringing this all together, I'm hoping that part of it will help us to communicate with more residents. Different things resonate for different people, but we're all part of this journey, and it's they both are. It can feel very depressing at times, but I hope that this will also give us a route to, a bit more hope and a bit more kind of, I think we have hope, but positive vision for the future, and people and behaviour change is going to be a key part of that.
Absolutely. I'm glad that I would like to see a bit more. I totally recognise that this is like an internal document and it's talking about how we're going to approach the strategy. But I think it would benefit from a bit more thought and consideration of sort of like the residents, both existing residents and future residents, attitude to nature, enthusiasm to nature. We know that there is an emotional connection, and we also know, that can be used, or that can help to mobilise sometimes a sense of panic and despair, and sometimes, positive action. But equally, I can absolutely hear people saying, my residents saying, well, if you care about nature, why are you building houses over it? Yeah. So we need to think about messaging there quite carefully, and perhaps a bit less on how this will help us obtain grants. I'm not denying that that is an issue, but I've seen many, many NGOs, turn themselves inside out to fit what they see as the donor's priority. And it creates this kind of disconnect between the the purpose of an organisation and the way it represents itself to donors. So I absolutely see why it's here, but there is a danger in kind of pushing that as a positive, especially in public documents.
But nevertheless, I mean, grants are to do good. I mean,
they absolutely are. But if we start to, design ourselves in a way to please donors and not see as part of local government is about being that interface. We're not just the bottom of the central government. We're the top of the community, if you like. Sure. So we're a bridge. Yeah. So we need to have something about representing those interests to donors rather than saying, oh, well, this week donors are interested in, Swifts. So sure. The government wants Swifts, so we're going to do Swifts. We're a Swift organisation. And then, I mean, I'm not saying that's what we're doing, but it just, it can sound quite, if you're a sort of resident, it can sound quite hollow sometimes.
Yeah. Andy?
Sorry, I want to just come back and reassure you, I suppose, that I've been here a long time, as many of you know, and I joined the Countryside Service, and we had 8 nature reserves and 2 country parks when I joined. And we used to do a lot more engagement with residents on each of those nature reserves because there were quite a small number of them. And I think in the fast growth we've seen over the last 30 years, we now have 3 country parks and just over 31 nature reserves. And that has diluted some of that public engagement that we've done and encouraging local stewardship of those sites. So, but we have started a process of redressing that. So we're about to appoint a community ranger again in the Countryside Service, and we are hoping to be able to start doing more of that engagement with local communities on their local sites. It's all very well for people to come to Dinton and have that wonderful experience at our country parks, but actually most of the time they spend is when they're out walking in their local facility. And one of the areas I think we'd quite like to concentrate on is we've seen a lot of new sayings developed in the Arborfield Green area and a new community there. And that seems like an opportunity to really trial that out with this community ranger and start doing some work parties so people can actually get involved in looking after those sites and establish that connection with nature locally. So. And I agree with you on the grant point. Yes, you shouldn't twist your objectives just to get the money. And
I'm not saying that's what you're doing. I'm saying you can get. I mean, from my experience, you can end up in a position where you appear to be, following the donor rather than following the reality on the ground. And the thing here is, from examples such as that, we can show that this is coming from. The reality on the ground, and it's just a pity if we give the impression that we're,
we need to be clear. We're ready to take the opportunities that grant present us with, but not just simply chasing them. I agree with that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I guess the other aspect is acknowledging that we will not have the resources, particularly coming back to Peter's point around resilience, to necessarily deliver everything we prove is needed, and so I hope it will put us in a good situation. So very much seeing it as how do we set where we want to go to, and hopefully, but also be clear we will need external support and be ready to get that in as effectively as possible.
Okay, that seems to be it. So that's the last of those agenda items. Thank you very much for coming and answering questions, and we can minute that on all the items. So I forgot to say it to the others before Sarah left. Okay, agenda item 32, which doesn't have I missed it because it doesn't say work programme at the top. The one more meeting of the municipal year, which is quite busy. So has anyone got any comments about what's on the... Yeah.
Perhaps suggest an addition to the March meeting. So the last meeting in the minutes talked about Trojan Energy, which is a pavement level connection for charging cars on the street. I think the timing was due to start something happening early this year. I think I'd quite like a kind of detailed presentation on that because I have a few concerns. Be useful to see what that really means in terms of delivery for...
It's quite a busy agenda already. I don't know whether we can... do you have any feelings about that, Mary?
Do we need to do that? If it's an information providing, would another forum be helpful, or setting up a members' call?
Could be all the meeting after the 4th of March. I mean, it doesn't have to be on the 4th of March. It's just I think it'd be beneficial because it's...
Get it on the forward plan.
Yes, because I've personally been sort of critical about our on-street charging strategy and capabilities, because I think we're doing stuff, but it's a drop in the ocean. This may get us a long way along that journey, but I have a few concerns which, if we get into the detail, hopefully will allay my worries.
I could take that back and pick up with the relevant officer in transport and work out the best time to bring that back based on the project plan.
Okay, and I asked the question earlier about the community energy update, which we didn't get in September. Sorry, I'm sort of getting two agenda items muddled up here, but I was just wondering whether we could have bring that report for, even if it's a short report in this busy agenda.
Yeah, we can certainly bring that and provide an update at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, because we were all so enthusiastic about it when we heard about it. It was about a year ago, wasn't it? Seems like it. Okay, on to the agenda item 33, where, as I said, we haven't actually had that further update. Any other comments on page 33? Page 34? Or page 35? I'll give you a minute to... Moses.
So I just want to ask a final question on these solar farm projects. So with the recent development, are you stopping further works on the solar farm until further notice?
So the next step was essentially to enter into contract, and we were hoping to do so this month. Given this news, I think that is on hold. I didn't hear any contradictions from the committee, but we do feel it would be inappropriate to enter into such a significant contract when we have this uncertainty about when we're actually going to be able to achieve it. So yes, I would say that largely those are on hold. I'll be catching up with the team to look at the details. For instance, one of the items that we were Plan issue was trial holes for the connections route, so understanding the pros and cons, but quite frankly, whilst there is this level of uncertainty, I think it is challenging to justify additional resources and spend on those two projects so the focus will be on addressing, the questions we have about this outcome, trying to get that addressed. If we kind of hit a dead brick wall there, then we'll be working with the best information we have available, which currently would be a pause. Yeah. But as Sarah mentioned, the Mere Oak Park and Ride, we see no impacts from these reforms. So hopefully, we will be continuing with work on that.
Okay. Everybody happy? Right. Well, thank you very much. And meeting is closed at, whatever the time is, 25 to 9. Not bad.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Beth.